The silence lasted exactly 47 minutes and 32 seconds. This, in the 17,000-year history of the Galactic Administrative Council, was approximately 47 minutes and 32 seconds longer than any previous silence had ever lasted. The problem, you see, was that nobody knew what to say. Globnax the Meticulous, a being who looked rather like a praying mantis, had been crossed with a filing cabinet and then given an anxiety disorder, stared at the holographic display floating above the obsidian conference table. His primary eye stalks twitched. His secondary eye stalks twitched. Even his tertiary eye stalks, which he normally reserved for reading fine print and expressing deep skepticism, twitched with an enthusiasm that bordered on panic. This cannot be correct, he finally managed, his translator struggling to convey the 17 layers of bureaucratic horror in his voice. I've triple-checked the data feeds, quadruple-checked the verification protocols. I even called maintenance to make sure the cosmic archives hadn't been compromised by space moths again. Around the circular chamber, 247 representatives from 247 different species sat in various states of what could only be described as existential confusion. Some had multiple heads that appeared to be arguing with each other. Others had appendages frozen mid-gesture, as if their brains had simply given up on sending signals to their extremities. Councillor Threnody, whose species had evolved on a planet with backwards-flowing time, and had therefore developed a particularly annoying habit of speaking in hindsight, finally broke the silence. We should have never opened that file, which we are currently regretting, which we will continue to regret. The file was flagged for routine review, Globnax protested, waving several appendages at once in what might have been distress or might have been an attempt at interpretive dance. His species had never quite sorted out the difference. Planet designation Sewell 3, classification, pre-contact civilization, type 0.7 on the Kardashev scale. Threat level, negligible. It was supposed to be a 15-minute review. I had a lunch appointment with Tributary Affairs. I was going to have the Andromedan soup. Show them the first entry, rumbled Councillor Vrax, a being who resembled a sentient geological formation and who had the distinction of being the only council member to have once slept through an entire interstellar war, the one that started this mess. Globnax's eye stalks drooped in defeat. He manipulated the holographic controls with the resigned air of someone who knows they're about to ruin everyone's day and possibly their entire worldview. The display shifted. Species name, humans. The file read in cheerfully bland bureaucratic typeface. Population, approximately 8 billion. Average lifespan, 73 cycles. Number of major conflicts in last 1,000 cycles, 462. Number of near-extinction events, 12, of which 11 were self-inflicted. Number of times. They've split the atom, successfully weaponized. Number of times they've left their planet, 6, using chemical propulsion that most species abandoned in their Bronze Age. Current status, actively ignoring cosmic threat designate Gamma 9, while arguing about ownership of small round ball. A small councillor from the Whistling Nebula made a sound like a tea kettle having an emotional breakdown. Keep going, Vrax said darkly. Show them the contradictions section. Globnax wished, not for the first time that day, that his species had evolved with the ability to faint. He scrolled down. Contradiction Alpha. Species demonstrates extraordinary capacity for mathematics and theoretical physics, while simultaneously believing that folding a fitted sheet is physically impossible. Contradiction. Beta. Successfully sent probes to edge of their star system while maintaining belief that tiny rocks under pillows exchange for currency. Contradiction Gamma. Developed global communication network, spanning entire planet, primary use, sharing images of small domesticated predators and arguing with strangers. Contradiction. Delta. Possesses full knowledge of astrophysics and deep time, celebrates anniversary of planet's solar revolution. by detonating colorful chemical explosives and consuming fermented plant matter until cognitive functions temporarily cease. Stop! Counselor Wisp of Morning, whose species communicated entirely through releasing different scented pollens, and who was currently emanating something that smelled distinctly like existential dread mixed with lavender, released a particularly pungent cloud. This is ridiculous. No species can be this contradictory. The data must be corrupted. I thought the same thing. Globnax's voice achieved a pitch that his translator gave up trying to render, simply displaying the symbol for bureaucratic despair instead. So I went deeper into the file. Do you want to know what I found? The silence that followed suggested that no, actually, nobody wanted to know what he found, but they all understood with a horrible certainty that they were going to find out anyway. They invented 47 different types of forks before discovering basic antibiotics. They worked out the mathematics to leave their planet before figuring out that washing hands prevents disease. They had nuclear weapons before they had seatbelts. They mapped their own genome while still arguing about whether tiny, invisible organisms cause illness. Threnady's time-shifted voice cut through the rising panic. I wish we had never asked for more details, which we are currently asking for, which we are about to regret asking for. Globnax was on a roll now, his anxiety having transformed into something closer to hysterical laughter. Oh, but wait, there's more. Section 17, subsection C, paragraph 4092. They have a complete understanding of nutrition science, comprehensive. They know exactly what they should eat to maintain optimal health. And do they do it? No, they have entire industrial sectors dedicated to producing things they know are terrible for them, and they eat them anyway, with enthusiasm, while knowing the consequences. A counselor from the crystalline depths, whose species had spent 3 million years achieving perfect logic and rationality, made a sound like mathematics, trying to cry. And then, Glornax continued, now fully in the grip of bureaucratic hysteria, Section 23, their linguistic patterns. They have over 6,000 distinct languages. Do you know what they use them for? Lying to each other. They developed complex systems of communication, primarily for the purpose of being deliberately unclear. They have words that mean opposite things, depending on how you say them. They have something called sarcasm, which is just saying the opposite of what you mean. Why would a species do this? Vrax, who had lived through the heat death of 17 stars and thought nothing could surprise him anymore, slowly lowered his massive crystalline head onto the table. There's more, isn't there? Oh, there's so much more! Globnax was now gesticulating with appendages he didn't even know he had. Section 41, military technology. They have weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, multiple times over. And do you know what they call the doctrine that prevents them from using these weapons? He paused for dramatic effect. Mutually assured destruction, MAD. They abbreviated it as MAD. They know it's insane. They put it in the name, and it's the only thing keeping them from annihilating themselves. Counselor Vree, whose species processed information through a form of quantum meditation that usually took 17 days per thought, had apparently fast-tracked their entire cognitive process just to interject, surely there must be some stabilizing factor, some aspect of their culture that provides coherence. Globnax pulled up another section of the file. His eye stalks were now moving in patterns that defied three-dimensional geometry. Section 67. Cultural practices. They have a nearly universal practice of voluntarily entering unconscious states for approximately 1/3 of their lifespan, during which they are completely vulnerable. And do you know what happens during these states? Please tell me something logical, Wisp of Morning pleaded, now smelling of desperation and chamomile. Their brains create elaborate false realities that they experience as if real, and then they wake up, and sometimes they spend the entire next day trying to remember what their own brains made up. They have entire fields of study dedicated to interpreting these fabricated experiences. Some of them even write them down and share them with others. The crystalline depth representative made another sound, this time like calculus weeping. But that's not even the weird part. Globnax had now achieved a state that his species' medical professionals would have classified as catastrophic enlightenment. The weird part is Section 93, creative output. While all of this chaos is happening, while they're simultaneously too stupid to avoid self-destruction and too clever for their own good, they produce art, literature, music. They take their contradictions and turn them into intentional emotional experiences. They celebrate their own confusion. They write stories about it. They create symphonies about the futility of existence and then enjoy listening to them. Threnodi's pollen cloud. Voice emerged again. We're all going to need therapy after this, which we are currently needing, which we should have gotten before opening this file. There's a section on something called reality television, Globnax whispered, his voice now hoarse from shouting. I don't even want to try to explain it. I'll just say that they deliberately watch other humans doing mundane tasks and consider it entertainment. They've weaponized boredom and sold it as a product. Councillor Nementh, who had been silent throughout the entire presentation, largely because his species' brain structure required them to process information through 17 different mental dimensions simultaneously, finally spoke. His voice had the quality of wind moving through a canyon filled with regret. How did we miss this? The file's been in the archives for 3,000 cycles. This planet should have been catalogued, assessed, and filed away with all the other pre-contact worlds. How did nobody notice? Globnax pulled up the file metadata, and the room somehow found a way to become even quieter. Filed under miscellaneous carbon-based civilizations, subsection, unlikely to achieve space travel, subsection, probably will extinct themselves before contact becomes relevant, subsection, check back in 10,000 cycles. He paused. Last review, never. Assignment reason, quote, planet shows no signs of coherent development, standard evolutionary dead end, low priority. Who? Vrax asked in a voice like continental plates grinding together, was responsible for that assessment. Every eye stalk in the chamber turned to look at a small, unassuming desk in the corner where Councillor Plivets sat. Plivets was a being who looked rather like someone had tried to draw a question mark, given up halfway through, and then the resulting scribble had achieved sentience and a minor bureaucratic position. Plivets made a sound that the translator rendered as, I retire. You can't retire! 17 councillors shouted simultaneously in 17 different languages, which the translation matrix briefly rendered as a sound like the universe itself experiencing buyer's remorse. The humans, Vrax said slowly, his geological patience finally cracking, have been one number filing away from joining the galactic community for 3,000 cycles. They've gone from hitting rocks together to splitting atoms in that time. They've developed quantum mechanics without even knowing we exist. They've created artificial intelligence without understanding natural intelligence. They've mapped their own genetic code while still arguing about where they came from. They had the internet for 50 cycles before working out that maybe, just maybe, they should verify if something is true before believing it. Globnax added helpfully. They're still working on that one. A councillor from the harmonized collective, whose species had achieved perfect social unity 3 million years ago and hadn't had an original thought since, spoke up in their characteristic monotone. Motion to reclassify Planet Sol 3, designation Earth, from negligible threat to... They paused, their unified consciousness apparently unable to agree on an appropriate threat level. To unprecedented? Motion to just seal the file and pretend we never saw it, another councillor suggested. Motion to seal the file, burn the archives, and move the council headquarters to another galaxy, a third offered. That's not how motions work, Globnax protested weakly. Councillor Wisp of Morning released a cloud that smelled distinctly of panic mixed with rosemary. We need to send an observer. Someone to actually go to this planet and verify that these reports aren't the result of some cosmic data corruption. Because if they're true, then we need to completely revise our understanding of how intelligent life develops. And if they're false, then we need to fire everyone involved with maintaining the archives and possibly investigate whether reality itself has become corrupted. Vrax's massive form shifted, causing minor seismic tremors in the council. Chamber. Agreed. We need verification. We need observation. We need someone to go down there, blend in, and report back on whether these humans are really as contradictory as the file suggests. But who do we send? Nemonth asked. This requires someone with exceptional observational skills, cultural sensitivity, the ability to pass as human, and the mental fortitude to withstand extended exposure to a species that apparently invented deep-fried butter. The entire council sat in contemplation for a moment. Then, as if guided by some universal principle of bureaucratic dysfunction, every single eye stalk, antenna, sensory organ and consciousness probe in the chamber slowly turned to look at a particular desk in the back row. At that desk sat Investigator Quillnoth. Quillnoth was relatively new to the council, having been assigned there as part of a mandatory diversity initiative after someone realized that the council had gone 4,000 cycles without hiring anyone from the Rigelian provinces. Quillnoth had been chosen specifically because he had failed the entrance examination 3 times, had a record of minor administrative violations that included filing a report in the wrong typeface, and had once accidentally declared war on a nebula because he'd mixed up the forms for territorial dispute and catering order. In other words, he was perfect for a mission nobody expected to succeed. Quillnoth looked up from the sandwich he was eating. That was another thing. Nobody was quite sure how he was eating a sandwich, given that his species didn't technically have a mouth or hands, or indeed any of the biological structures usually associated with sandwich consumption. Yet there he was, definitely eating what appeared to be a sandwich, in defiance of several laws of physics and at least one health regulation. "Who? Me?" his translator rendered, though the original phrase in his language apparently translated more accurately as, "Oh no, not this again." "Investigator Quillnoth," Vrax began, in the tone of someone about to make a terrible decision, "and knowing it, how would you like a field assignment?" Quillnoth swallowed what might have been sandwich. "Does it involve paperwork?" "Minimal." "Does it involve danger?" "Probably not, unless you count existential confusion as danger." "Does it get me out of attending the budget committee meetings next quarter?" Vrax paused. "Yes." "I'm in!" Quillnoth stood up so enthusiastically that he knocked over his chair, 3 filing cabinets that weren't anywhere near him, and somehow a potted plant in an entirely different dimension. "When do I leave?" "You'll need to undergo transformation to blend in with the human population," Globnax explained, pulling up a holographic image of a human being. "This is the average human template. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry, approximately 2 meters tall, singular head, forward-facing eyes, ridiculous number of fingers and toes." "They only have 5 fingers?" Quillnoth exclaimed. "How do they count?" "Very slowly, apparently," Globnax muttered. "Your mission," Vrax continued, "is simple. Go to Earth, observe the humans in their natural habitat, verify whether the reports in this file are accurate, report back. Try not to cause an interstellar incident, and definitely don't let them know you're an alien." "How hard can it be?" Quillnoth asked, which in the grand tradition of last words before disaster sealed his fate with the efficiency of a cosmic punchline. "You'll be inserted into one of their population centers," Globnax explained, pulling up maps of Earth. "We'll provide you with local currency, identity documentation, and a basic guide to human behavior. You'll have a communication device disguised as one of their smartphones. which is apparently what they call the rectangular objects they stare at, instead of talking to each other. Sounds straightforward, Quilnoth said, which demonstrated exactly why he'd failed his entrance exams 3 times. One more thing, Wisp of Morning added, releasing a cloud that smelled like warning mixed with mint. According to the file, humans have something called uncanny valley response. If you're too perfect at mimicking them, they'll instinctively know something's wrong. You need to be slightly imperfect, a little awkward, a bit strange. Quilnoth, who had once gotten lost in a corridor that only went in one direction and had somehow ended up in a parallel dimension, smiled. Well, the translator said he smiled. His actual expression would have caused sanity issues for most carbon-based life forms. I think I can manage that. The council voted unanimously to approve the mission, mostly because nobody wanted to volunteer instead, and partly because there was a general consensus that if anyone was going to survive prolonged exposure to human logic, it would be someone who didn't have much logic to begin with. As Quilnoth left to undergo transformation, Vrax turned to Globnax. This is either going to answer all our questions or raise entirely new ones we didn't even know we should be worried about. I'm voting for the second option, Globnax replied, his eye stalks drooping with exhaustion. Motion to establish a betting pool on how long Quilnoth lasts before the humans realize he's not one of them, someone suggested. Motion to establish a second betting pool on how long before he thinks he is one of them, another added. The motions passed unanimously. Threnady's time-shifted voice drifted across the chamber one final time before the session ended. We are going to regret this decision, which we are currently making, which we will have regretted. 3 weeks later, Investigator Quilnoth stood in what humans called an airport, wearing what humans called clothes, and feeling what could only be described as profound concern that his skin might be on backwards. The transformation process had gone, well, smoothly would be an overstatement. Without causing permanent damage to the space-time continuum would be more accurate. He now had the approximate appearance of a human male in his early 30s, with brown hair, brown eyes, and a face that the transformation technician had described as generic enough to be forgettable, but not so generic that people will think you're a spy, which is good because you are a spy, but they shouldn't think that. He was dressed in what the cultural database had assured him was casual business attire suitable for a non-threatening first impression. This consisted of something called khakis and a button-down shirt in a color the database had labeled as confused blue. His cover story was simple: visiting professor of anthropology from a small European country that nobody had ever heard of. The council's forgery department had created an entire university back on the mainland that would verify his credentials if anyone checked, which they'd determined humans almost never did, because their bureaucratic systems were held together with what appeared to be optimism and expired software. "Excuse me, sir?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. "You've been standing in front of the baggage carousel for 20 minutes. Are you waiting for luggage?" Quilnoth turned to find a human female in an airport uniform, looking at him with the expression humans made when they were being professionally polite, while privately thinking someone was having a mental breakdown. "Ah, yes, luggage," Quilnoth said, grateful that his translator was programmed to make him sound like he had a vaguely European accent that humans couldn't quite place. "I am waiting for my bag of holding possessions." The woman blinked. "Your suitcase?" "Yes, that is the word, suitcase. I am still learning the American, the English, the American English." This was technically true. He'd had approximately 16 hours to learn an entire language, most of which he'd spent being transformed from a being that existed partially in non-Euclidean space into something that could fit through doorways without causing headaches. "Where are you visiting from?" the woman asked, clearly trying to be friendly. "Latvaskia," Quilnoth said brightly, naming the country that the council's forgery department had invented. They'd placed it somewhere between Latvia and Slovakia and hoped nobody would look too closely at a map. "Oh," I don't think I've heard of that before. Yes, it is very small. We are known for our exported products of cheese. He'd meant to say cheese exports, but his translator was still calibrating to handle English word order, which apparently sometimes worked backwards for no reason whatsoever. That's nice, the woman said, in the tone humans used when they wanted to end a conversation but were too polite to just walk away. Well, good luck finding your suitcase. As she left, Quilnoth realized with growing horror that he had no idea what his suitcase looked like. The briefing had mentioned luggage would be provided, but in the chaos of transformation and departure, nobody had actually shown him which bag was his. He stared at the carousel as dozens of identical black bags circled past like some kind of existential metaphor. This was going to be harder than he thought. After grabbing 3 wrong suitcases, apologizing to 2 annoyed humans, and accidentally knocking over a small child while trying to wrestle a particularly stubborn bag off the carousel, Quilnoth finally found his luggage by the simple expedient of waiting until he was the only person left in the baggage claim area. The remaining suitcase was, by process of elimination, his. It was bright orange and had a tag that read, "Definitely not an alien," in letters large enough to be seen from space. Quilnoth made a mental note to file a complaint with whoever had packed his luggage. The council had arranged accommodation for him in a city called Portland, which the database assured him was statistically average for observing typical human behavior. What the database had failed to mention was that Portland's definition of typical was somewhat different from the rest of humanity's. His apartment was in a building that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood architecture in theory, but not in practice. The elevator made sounds that suggested it was more of a suggestion than a reliable form of transportation. His unit was on the 4th floor, which he reached by taking the elevator to the 3rd floor and then walking up because the elevator had trust issues with the 4th floor, according to the superintendent who had met him at the entrance. The superintendent, a human male who introduced himself as Rolf, had the appearance of someone who'd given up on life but was too stubborn to admit it. He wore stained sweatpants and a T-shirt that read, "I paused my game to be here." "Rent's due on the 1st, Rolf said, handing Quilnoth a key that looked like it had been forged during the Iron Age. "No loud music after 10, no pets, no parties, no fun of any kind, really. Trash goes down the chute on the 2nd floor. Don't put anything recyclable in the regular trash, or Mrs. Pemberton in 3B will know, and she will leave passive-aggressive notes on your door." "Understood," Quilnoth said, wondering what passive-aggressive meant and why notes would be aggressive at all. "You're the professor, right? From that Eastern European place?" "Latvaskia, yes. I am here to study the human cultures and their meaning." Rolf squinted at him. "You feeling all right, buddy? You look a little, I don't know, off." This was exactly what Quilnoth had been warned about, the uncanny valley response. He was triggering some instinctive human recognition that something wasn't quite right. "I am suffering from the lag of jet," he said quickly. "Very tired from the flying through air in metal tube." "Yeah, jet lag's a bitch," Rolf agreed, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "Well, welcome to the building. Try not to bother anyone, and you'll fit right in. We're all weird here anyway." As Quilnoth unpacked his orange suitcase in his new apartment, he activated his communication device to file his first report to the council. "Day 1 report," he began, speaking into the device that looked like a slightly too large smartphone. "Successfully arrived on planet Earth, currently established in local human dwelling. Initial observations, everything is exactly as confusing as the file suggested, possibly more so. Humans appear to have developed a social system based primarily on avoiding each other while living in close proximity. We'll continue observations tomorrow." He looked around his apartment. It contained what the briefing materials had called furniture, though Quilnoth suspected that was a generous term for the collection of objects that seemed designed more for aesthetic discomfort than actual utility. There was a couch that appeared to have been assembled by someone who had heard about seating but never actually experienced it, a coffee table that wasn't at the right height for anything, and a television that was apparently the human version of a reality distortion field, showing flickering images that humans would stare at for hours. He turned on the television, figuring this would be a good way to observe human culture. The first channel showed humans in a kitchen, yelling at each other about food preparation. The second channel showed humans in a jungle, eating insects while also yelling. The third channel showed humans in what appeared to be a medical facility, dramatically yelling while performing surgery. Every channel, apparently, involved humans yelling at each other in different contexts. Fascinating, Quillnoth muttered, making notes. Human communication appears to consist primarily of raised voices in stressful situations, broadcast for entertainment purposes. Query: is this documentary evidence of their natural state or performance art? Further investigation required. His first week in Portland was an education in human contradiction that made the council files look understated. He learned that humans would wait patiently in orderly lines for everything, except when it came to boarding public transportation, at which point all social order collapsed and it became survival of the pushiest. He learned that humans had invented something called small talk, which was specifically designed to avoid talking about anything meaningful. He learned that when a human asked, "How are you?" they did not actually want to know how you were, and responding with detailed information about your digestive processes was apparently oversharing. And why did you think I needed to know that? He learned this the hard way. He also learned that humans had developed an extraordinarily complex system of coffee culture that involved at least 17 different ways to serve what was essentially hot bean water. And if you ordered wrong, the person behind the counter would judge you silently while maintaining a professional smile. "Can I get a large coffee?" Quillnoth had asked on his first morning, proud of himself for remembering the correct terminology. "You mean a venti?" the barista had corrected. "No, I mean large. Venti is large. Then why not call it large? Because it's venti. But venti means 20 in Italian, and your large coffee is not 20 ounces, it's 24 ounces. The barista had stared at him with an expression that suggested she'd just witnessed the heat death of the universe and was powerless to stop it. "Do you want the coffee or not?" "I want the large." "Venti. Large. Sir, please." They'd compromised on him pointing at the size he wanted, while she muttered something about, "Why do I even work here?" under her breath. But the real education came from his job. The council had secured him a position at Portland State University as a visiting professor in the anthropology department. His cover was that he was researching comparative cultural analysis of modern urban societies, which was technically true if you considered modern urban societies to include any society that hasn't figured out faster-than-light travel yet. His first lecture was an experience that would haunt him for the rest of his considerably long life. The classroom held approximately 30 humans in their late teens and early 20s, all of whom regarded him with the universal expression of students everywhere. Mild curiosity mixed with hope that this class would require minimal effort. "Good morning," Quillnoth began, trying to project what the instructional videos had called professorial authority. "I am Professor Quillnoth, and I will be teaching you about the humans." There was a pause. "About us?" a female student in the front row asked. "Yes! I am here to observe and document your fascinating cultural practices and behavioral patterns," Quillnoth said enthusiastically, then realized from their expressions that he'd somehow said something wrong. "I mean, to teach you about yourselves from an anthropological perspective." "Dude," said a male student in a backwards baseball cap, "are you feeling okay? You look kinda sweaty?" Quillnoth was indeed sweaty. Maintaining human form required constant concentration, and stress made it worse. He could feel his cellular structure trying to revert to its natural state, which would be problematic given that his natural state involved existing partially in four-dimensional space. "I'm experiencing the jet lag still," he said quickly, "and also the culture shock of being in America, which is very different from Latvaskia." "Where?" several students asked simultaneously. "It is a small country in Europe. Very obscure. You would not have heard of it. We are known for cheese and also for keeping to ourselves." He launched into his prepared lecture, which the council's education department had assured him would blend seamlessly into human pedagogical standards. What they had not mentioned was that their research was based on educational systems from 3,000 years ago, which meant his teaching style was approximately aligned with ancient Greek philosophers who died before Socrates was born. "Today we will explore the question, what is a human?" Quilnoth announced dramatically. "And more importantly, why is a human?" The students exchanged glances that suggested they were collectively wondering if it was too late to drop this class. "Let us begin with basic anatomy." Quilnoth pulled up a diagram on the projector screen. Unfortunately, due to a mild malfunction in his communication device, the diagram showed not a human skeleton, but rather his own species' skeletal structure, which resembled what might happen if you asked a committee to design a vertebrate, and everyone had different ideas about what vertebrate meant. "This," Quilnoth said confidently, gesturing at the non-Euclidean horror on the screen, "is the human skeletal system." A student in the back row raised her hand slowly. "Professor, are those tentacles?" Quilnoth looked at the screen, looked back at the students, looked at the screen again. "Ah, ha ha, that is a joke. I am testing if you were paying attention. This is what happens when humans evolve incorrectly." He fumbled with his device, trying to find the actual human skeleton diagram. "Let me show you the real human structure." The next image was somehow worse. It appeared to be a human skeleton, but someone had labeled all the bones with names that sounded vaguely medical, but were actually just random words strung together. "As you can see," Quilnoth continued, pointing at the image, "humans have the standard bipedal structure, with the femurius maximus connecting to the knee bone joint area, which connects to the lower leg region." "That's not even close to correct," the female student in the front row said. She pulled out her phone, presumably to verify that her professor was, in fact, making up bone names. "The femur connects to the patella and tibia. This is basic anatomy. Did you even go to medical school? I am not a medical doctor. I am an anthropologist. I study culture, not bones, although bones are part of culture. When you think about it, skeletons are very cultural." The backwards cap student raised his hand. "Professor, are you sure you're okay? Because you keep saying weird stuff, and honestly, some of us are concerned." Quilnoth felt his cellular cohesion slipping. The stress was too much. He needed to end this lecture before he accidentally revealed that he was an alien investigator from a galactic government that their species didn't know existed. "Class dismissed," he shouted suddenly. "For today, go forth and be human, which you are. Very good at being. I will see you on Wednesday. Bring your learning materials." As the students filed out, muttering amongst themselves, Quilnoth collapsed into his chair and sent an emergency message to the council. "Day 7 report. Have made significant progress in understanding human behavior. Primary finding, humans are very good at detecting when something is wrong, even if they cannot articulate what. Secondary finding, teaching humans about themselves while pretending to be one of them is exponentially harder than anticipated. Request immediate support materials on human anatomy. The ones you provided appear to be for a different species, possibly the wrong planet entirely. Also, what is a meme and why do students keep referencing them?" The council's response came 6 hours later. "Investigator Quilnoth, your reports are concerning. However, you are making progress. Continue observations. Try to blend in more effectively. Avoid triggering human suspicion. Anatomy materials forwarded. Regarding memes, We have no idea. Several research teams are investigating. Preliminary findings suggest they are either a form of cultural transmission or evidence that humans have developed a hive mind, possibly both. Stay safe. Counsel out. Quilnoth stared at the message, then stared at his apartment ceiling, then at the message again. He had been on Earth for exactly 1 week and had learned the following. Humans said "thank you" to automated voices. They apologized to furniture when they bumped into it. They had named a day of the week after the god of thunder from a dead religion. They measured temperature in 3 different systems depending on what they were measuring. They drove on the right side of the road in America, but the left side in other countries for reasons nobody could adequately explain. They had 17 different words for cold, but only 1 word for love, which they used for everything from romantic partners to sandwiches. And that was just the start. Over the following weeks, Quilnoth descended deeper into what could only be described as anthropological madness. He discovered that humans had invented something called social media, which was apparently designed to make everyone feel inadequate, while simultaneously convincing them they needed to share every thought they'd ever had, including thoughts that should have stayed private or preferably not been thought at all. He joined a platform called Twitter under the handle Professor Q, figuring it would help him understand human communication patterns. His first tweet, "Hello humans, I am very much enjoying being a human on this planet Earth. The oxygen is delicious." Within minutes, he had 17 responses. Bro, are you okay? This is either the best performance art account or someone having a stroke. The oxygen is what now? New robot just dropped and it's unhinged. Quilnoth reported this back to the council. Humans have developed a communication system where brevity is valued above coherence. When confused, they assume artificial intelligence rather than extraterrestrial intelligence. This may work in our favor. He also discovered dating apps, which appeared to be humanity's solution to the age-old problem of meeting people, by replacing it with the new problem of judging people based on 5 photos and a joke about pizza. He'd created a profile mostly to observe the social dynamics. His bio read, "Professor visiting from Latvaskia, enjoys learning about human culture, has all regular human organs, very normal." His first match was a woman named Jessica who messaged him, "Your bio is either hilarious or concerning, and I can't tell which." "It is accurate," he responded. "So you're saying you're not normal?" "No, I am very normal. I have the standard number of organs arranged in the typical configuration." "How many organs is the standard number?" Quilnoth panicked. He didn't actually know. He'd skimmed the anatomy materials. "Enough organs, the correct amount. Shall we meet for coffee?" They met at a downtown cafe that smelled of burnt beans and crushed dreams. Jessica was a graphic designer who, according to her own description, made logos for companies that definitely didn't need new logos, but had budget to burn. She studied him across the table with an expression that suggested she was trying to solve a puzzle she hadn't realized existed. "So," she said carefully, "Latvaskia?" "Yes, small country, cheese exports, very private people." "I googled it, couldn't find anything." "We are very private." "Right." She sipped her coffee, which she'd ordered as a half-calf triple-shot oat milk latte with a pump of vanilla and a sprinkle of cinnamon, but not too much cinnamon, because last time they put too much cinnamon. Quilnoth had needed 17 seconds just to process that this was a valid coffee order. He had ordered hot bean water, which the barista had interpreted as an Americano, which was apparently different from regular coffee in ways that nobody had adequately explained to him. "So what brings you to Portland?" Jessica asked. "I am studying human behavior patterns for anthropological purposes. You are all very fascinating." We are." "Yes, for instance." Quilnoth leaned forward enthusiastically, causing his coffee to spill slightly. You have developed complex rituals around bean consumption. This establishment has 47 different possible coffee combinations. 47! And yet when I attempted to order them alphabetically to document them, I was asked to leave the line. Jessica laughed, though Quilneth wasn't sure if she was laughing with him or at him. Possibly both, possibly neither. Human laughter was complicated. You're really weird, you know that? I have been told this, yes, multiple times, by multiple humans, including some who appeared concerned for my well-being. Are you okay? Like, genuinely? And there it was again. That human instinct that something wasn't quite right. They couldn't put their finger on it, couldn't articulate exactly what was wrong, but some ancient part of their brain was sending up warning flares. I am perfectly adequate, Quilneth assured her. I am experiencing the normal amount of functionality for a human being. My organs are organing, my blood is circulating, my neurons are neuroning. Jessica set down her coffee. Okay, I'm just going to ask, are you like an android? Because if you're some kind of AI experiment, that's actually really cool and I want to know more about it. I'm not an android. Are you sure? Very sure. I am made of organic matter, carbon-based life form, standard Earth biology. Then why do you talk like you learned English from a manual written by someone who'd never actually spoken to a human? Quilneth froze. This was too close, too accurate. He needed to deflect. It is my accent from Latvaskia. We speak very formally. It is cultural. Jessica studied him for a long moment, then smiled. You know what? I don't care. You're weird, but weird is good. Normal people are boring. Want to get out of here and do something actually interesting. What is the interesting thing we would do? I don't know. Walk around, talk. That's what people do on dates, right? This is a date? Quilneth said louder than intended. Several other patrons turned to look. I mean, yeah, we matched on a dating app. We met for coffee. That's generally how dates work. Oh, yes, of course, I knew this. I was merely emphasizing the dateness of the situation, for date purposes. They walked through downtown Portland, and Quilneth found himself actually enjoying the experience. Jessica pointed out various landmarks, explained the history of different neighborhoods, and introduced him to the concept of food trucks, which were apparently restaurants on wheels, because humans had decided that mobile food distribution was more efficient than stationary food distribution, except it wasn't really more efficient. It was just more interesting, and humans valued interesting over efficient. That truck sells Korean-Mexican fusion tacos, Jessica explained. That one over there does artisanal grilled cheese, and that one specializes in vegan bacon cheeseburgers, which sounds like a contradiction, but actually works somehow. Why do humans combine foods from different cultures? Quilneth asked, genuinely curious. Because it tastes good? Because we can? Because someone tried it once and it worked out? Jessica shrugged. Humans are really good at taking things that shouldn't go together and making them work. Quilneth filed this observation away. It was actually quite profound. Humans did seem to specialize in combining contradictions into functional wholes. What do you like to eat? Jessica asked. Quilneth panicked. He'd been surviving on a carefully calibrated nutrient paste that the council had provided, which tasted like regret mixed with compressed sadness, but provided all necessary sustenance for his transformed biological state. I enjoy food, multiple types, all the normal human foods. Okay, but like specifically the edible ones. Jessica laughed again. You're really committing to this bit, aren't you? What bit? The whole, I'm an alien trying to learn about humans thing. It's funny. Ha ha, yes, it is a bit. I am not actually an alien. That would be ridiculous. Aliens probably don't even exist. And if they did exist, they certainly wouldn't be here pretending to be professors and going on dates with graphic designers in Portland. Right, Jessica said, smiling in a way that suggested she didn't entirely believe him, but was willing to play along. They spent the next 3 hours wandering the city, and Quilnoth found himself learning more about human behavior in those 3 hours than he had in all his previous observation combined. Because Jessica, unlike his students or his superintendent or the various bureaucrats he'd encountered, actually talked to him like a person. She asked questions, she shared stories, she explained things without judgment. She told him about her family, about growing up in a small town and moving to the city, about relationships that hadn't worked out and dreams that hadn't quite materialized but were still worth having. She talked about her job, about the satisfaction of creating something visual that communicated ideas without words, about the frustration of clients who thought they knew design better than she did. And Quilnoth, despite himself, despite his mission, despite being literally from another planet, found himself connecting, understanding, empathizing. When they finally parted ways at sunset, Jessica gave him her number and said, "This was fun. Let's do it again sometime." "Yes, I would enjoy another date time with you." "Date time, sure. That's what we'll call it." As he walked back to his apartment, Quilnoth realized something troubling. He was starting to like humans, not as research subjects, not as data points in a file, but as actual beings worth knowing. This was going to complicate his report. That night, he sent his most detailed message yet to the council. Week 3 report. Have made breakthrough in understanding human behavior through direct social engagement. Key finding: humans are not actually as contradictory as they appear. Rather, they are comfortable with contradiction. They exist in states of multiple simultaneous truths. They can be both logical and emotional, both kind and cruel, both brilliant and foolish, often within the same conversation. This is not dysfunction. This is feature, not bug. They have built an entire civilization on the principle that consistency is less important than adaptability. Further research required, but preliminary conclusion: we may have been measuring them against the wrong standards. The council's response came surprisingly quickly. Investigator Quilnoth. Your report is noted but concerning. Please remember you are there to observe, not to philosophize. Maintain professional distance. Do not become emotionally compromised. Continue mission parameters. Also, what is a date time and why did you need one? Quilnoth ignored the question and continued his observations. His classes got marginally better as he learned to actually listen to his students rather than lecturing at them. He discovered that if he asked them questions about their own experiences and then connected those experiences to broader anthropological concepts, they actually engaged with the material. One student, a quiet kid named Trevor, who sat in the back and never spoke, stayed after class one day. "Professor Q?" Trevor asked hesitantly. "Yes, Trevor? Are you okay? Like really?" "Not this again." "I am functional." "Yes." "Why do you ask?" "It's just, you seem really stressed. And like you're a good teacher, but sometimes you say things that are just off. And I was wondering if maybe you're going through something." Quilnoth felt something unexpected. The human emotion called being touched. Trevor wasn't suspicious. He was concerned. "I am adjusting," Quilnoth said carefully, "to being in a new place, with different customs. It is challenging." "Yeah, I get that. I moved here from Nebraska last year. Total culture shock. Everyone here is so weird compared to back home. But like good weird, you know? I am learning this, yes. Anyway, if you ever need someone to show you around or explain stuff, let me know. You seem cool, even if you are kind of strange." After Trevor left, Quilnoth sat in the empty classroom and experienced what humans called having feelings. It was deeply uncomfortable. The weeks turned into months. Quilnoth settled into a routine that felt increasingly natural. Coffee in the morning at the place where the barista had stopped judging him for ordering wrong. Teaching his classes with gradually improving competence. Regular date times with Jessica, who had somehow become his girlfriend, which was a concept he still didn't entirely understand, but which seemed to involve spending time together and occasionally arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. For the record, Quillnoth had researched this controversy extensively and determined that humans spent a truly irrational amount of time debating the appropriate placement of tropical fruit on Italian flatbread, and that this somehow represented everything that was both wonderful and terrible about their species. He filed regular reports to the council, each one growing more detailed and more conflicted. Month 2. Report. Humans have concept called brunch, which is neither breakfast nor lunch, but somehow both. They wait in lines for up to 2 hours to experience this temporal meal paradox. When asked why, response is invariably, "The Eggs Benedict is really good here. Have concluded humans will endure significant inconvenience for marginal improvements in egg quality." Month 3. Report. Attended human social gathering called Game Night. Humans voluntarily subjected themselves to competitive stress through cardboard rectangles, with rules that changed based on which rectangle they selected. Observed multiple instances of normally calm individuals becoming irrationally invested in acquisition of colored paper currency that has no value outside context of game. One human flipped table. Other humans considered this socially acceptable outcome. Still processing. Month 4 report. Jessica introduced me to her parents. Explained I was from Eastern Europe. Her father spent 20 minutes asking questions about Latvaskian politics that I had to invent answers to in real time. Her mother asked if I was treating her daughter right, which I interpreted as inquiry about adequate behavioral standards. Apparently, correct response is yes, regardless of actual answer. Human family structures appear to be built on polite fictions and mutual agreement not to examine too closely. Not unlike council bureaucracy, actually. It was during month 5 that things started to go sideways. Quillnoth had been invited to present at a faculty mixer, where professors from different departments gathered to pretend to be interested in each other's research while drinking wine and eating small amounts of cheese arranged on wooden boards. He was talking with Dr. Reeves from the physics department, a human female with grey hair and the expression of someone who'd spent 40 years trying to explain quantum mechanics to undergraduates and had developed a permanent facial twitch as a result. "So, your research is on comparative cultural analysis?" Dr. Reeves asked, holding a glass of red wine that she hadn't actually drunk from yet, but was using as a conversation prop. "Yes, I am studying how different societies develop similar solutions to universal problems." "Fascinating. Have you looked at technological development patterns?" "Some, yes. It is interesting how many societies independently discover fire, agriculture, wheel, mathematics, quantum physics, faster-than-light travel." He paused, realizing too late what he'd said. Dr. Reeves's eyebrows rose so high they nearly achieved escape velocity. "I'm sorry, did you just say faster-than-light travel?" "Did I? I meant future travel, time travel, in fiction, human science fiction, which I enjoy. As a human." "Right." Dr. Reeves studied him with the intense focus of someone whose entire career was based on spotting when the universe wasn't behaving correctly. "You know, there's something about you I can't quite put my finger on. You're knowledgeable, clearly intelligent, but sometimes you say things that are just slightly wrong. Like you learned everything from a textbook written by someone who'd never actually experienced any of it. This was too close, too accurate. It is my foreign background, and also possible wine intoxication. This is my first glass and I am feeling the effects. That's your first SIP. I have low tolerance, must go, bathroom, human biological necessity." He fled to the bathroom, locked himself in a stall, and sent an emergency message to the council. "Possible compromise. Physics professor suspects something. Recommend extraction protocols." The council's response, negative. Mission continues. You are overthinking. Humans are naturally paranoid about many things. She has no evidence. Maintain cover. Stay calm. But Dr. Reeves wasn't the only one noticing things. Over the next few weeks, Quilnoth became aware of being observed. Not obviously, not by anyone official, but students lingered after class asking strange questions. Colleagues made odd comments. Even Rolf, the superintendent, mentioned that you're not like other professors, you know. Those guys are usually pretentious assholes, but you're just weird. Then came the incident with the coffee shop. Quilnoth had developed a routine. Every morning at 7:47 a.m., he went to the same coffee shop and ordered the same Americano from the same barista, whose name was Samira, and who had long ago given up trying to understand him and now just made his coffee while shaking her head in resigned amusement. But on this particular morning, there was a new barista. Young guy, probably early 20s, with the intensity of someone who took coffee very seriously. "What can I get you?" he asked. "The usual, please." "I don't know your usual." "I'm new." "Oh, then I will have hot bean water black in the medium size." The barista stared at him. "You mean an Americano?" "If that is what you call hot bean water, yes." "Why do you call it that?" "Because it is accurate description. You take beans, roast them, grind them, add hot water, bean water. But it's coffee, which is bean water. It's not just bean water, it's a specific preparation method. The beans are carefully sourced, roasted to exact specifications, ground to precise consistency. To make hot bean water. The barista's eye twitched. "Sir, do you want coffee, or are you here to have an existential crisis about the nature of beverages? Can it not be both?" Behind Quilnoth, a line of increasingly annoyed Portland residents began making impatient sounds. One of them muttered, "It's too early for this philosophical bullshit." He got his coffee and sat down, only to find Samira on her break, watching him with barely concealed amusement. "You broke the new guy," she said. "I merely asked for coffee in descriptive terms." "You're lucky this is Portland. Anywhere else, they'd have kicked you out by now. Here, everyone just assumes you're being artistically weird." "I am not being artistic. I am being accurate." Samira laughed. "You know what? I'm going to miss you when you leave." "Leave? I am not leaving." "Come on, professor from some country nobody's heard of, shows up for a semester or two, does research, then disappears. We get guys like you all the time. You're not staying. Nobody stays." This hit Quilnoth harder than expected, because she was right. He wasn't staying. This was temporary, a mission. Once he'd gathered sufficient data, he'd return to the council, file his reports, and never see any of these humans again. Jessica, Trevor, Samira, Dr. Reeves, even the annoying new barista. They'd all just be data points in a file. The thought made something in his chest area hurt, which was concerning, because that wasn't even where his primary cardiac organ was located in his natural form. That evening, he had dinner with Jessica at her apartment. She cooked something she called stir-fry, which appeared to be vegetables and protein combined in a metal bowl over heat until they reached appropriate consumption temperature. "You're quiet tonight," Jessica observed, using wooden implements to transfer food from cooking vessel to eating vessel in a manner Quilnoth had learned was called serving. "I am thinking about how strange humans are." "We're not that strange." "You absolutely are. You are the strangest species I have ever encountered in literature. You have all this knowledge and technology, but you use it to argue on the internet and watch videos of felines. You know your planet is heating to dangerous levels, but you continue behaviors that cause this. You understand statistics and probability, but you buy lottery tickets. You are living contradictions." Jessica set down her wooden implements. "Are you okay, like really? Because you've been acting weird, well, weirder than usual." "Define weird." "Like you're stressed about something you can't talk about, like you're here but not here, you know, like you're, I don't know, observing us instead of being with us." Quilnoth felt his cellular cohesion slip slightly. The stress was affecting his transformation stability. "I am sorry, I have been preoccupied with my research." "What exactly are you researching?" You've never really explained it. I am studying, he paused, choosing words carefully, human behavior patterns, how you make decisions, how you interact, how you build societies despite all your contradictions. And what have you learned? That you are remarkable, frustrating and illogical and absolutely maddening, but remarkable. You build beauty out of chaos. You create meaning where there shouldn't be any. You take impossible situations and somehow make them work. Jessica smiled. Was that a compliment? It was an observation that happens to be positive. Yes. Good enough. She leaned across the table and kissed him, which Quilnoth had learned was a human gesture of affection that involved pressing mouthparts together in a manner that should have been unhygienic, but somehow wasn't. Later that night, alone in his apartment, Quilnoth composed his most honest report yet. Month 5 report. I am compromised. I have developed emotional attachments to research subjects. I find myself caring about these humans, not as data points but as individuals. I understand their contradictions now. They are not bugs. They are features. Humans exist in constant state of becoming. They are never finished, always changing, adapting, growing. This is why they are so confusing to observe. We have been trying to measure them as complete, but they are perpetually in progress. Recommend? Actually, I do not know what to recommend. Further research needed, or possibly I just want excuse to stay longer. The council's response was immediate and sharp. Investigator Quilnoth, you are hereby reminded of your mission parameters and professional obligations. Emotional compromise is unacceptable. You are to complete your observations and prepare for extraction. We have sufficient data. Your mission is effectively complete. Prepare for retrieval in 30 cycles. 30 cycles. 1 month. And then he'd have to leave. He looked around his apartment, at the terrible couch, the useless coffee table, the television that he'd actually grown fond of, despite its purpose being essentially box that shows moving pictures to distract from existential concerns. He thought about his students, who'd actually started to improve in their work. About Samira, who made his coffee wrong in exactly the right way. About Dr. Reeves, who still suspected something but had decided to be amused rather than alarmed. About Jessica, who looked at him like he was weird but worth it. And he made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences he couldn't possibly predict. He sent one word back to the council. No. The response came back in approximately 0.03 seconds, which suggested the council had several members simultaneously having the same reaction. What do you mean no? I mean no. I am not ready to leave. My research is not complete. There is more to learn. I request extension. Denied. You are ordered to prepare for extraction. With respect, I refuse extraction. I am staying. There was a longer pause this time. Quilnoth could imagine the chaos in the council chambers. An investigator refusing orders, refusing to come home. This had probably never happened before in the council's entire history. Finally, a response. Investigator Quilnoth, are you declaring yourself compromised? No. I'm declaring myself committed to completing the mission correctly. You sent me here to understand humans. I'm finally starting to actually understand them. You want me to leave now, when I'm just getting to the interesting data? Another pause. You have 60 more cycles, then extraction is mandatory. And Quilnoth, do not make us regret this decision. 60 cycles. 2 months. It wasn't enough, but it was something. He spent those 2 months diving deeper into human culture than ever before. He attended a concert where humans gathered in a dark room to listen to amplified sounds that were technically music, but played so loudly it caused temporary hearing damage that they apparently considered acceptable. He went to a sports game where humans cheered for people throwing balls into nets with enthusiasm that bordered on religious fervor. He participated in a potluck where everyone brought food to share, and he brought his nutrient paste, which everyone politely tried and then quietly avoided for the rest of the evening. He even let Jessica drag him to something called karaoke, where humans voluntarily humiliated themselves by singing badly in front of strangers for fun. When it was his turn, he selected a song that Jessica assured him was a classic. He stood in front of a room full of strangers and sang "Don't Stop Believin'" with more enthusiasm than accuracy, and when he finished, people actually cheered. Not because he was good, he was terrible, but because he'd tried, because he'd been willing to be vulnerable and ridiculous in front of them. That, Quilnoth realized, was the secret. Humans valued the attempt, the effort, the willingness to fail spectacularly in pursuit of something worth doing. He filed his final report on the last possible day before extraction. Final report on human species. After 6 months of intensive observation and integration, I have reached the following conclusions. Humans are contradictory because consistency would require them to choose between mutually exclusive goods. They want security and freedom, tradition and progress, logic and emotion. Rather than choose, they hold all possibilities simultaneously and navigate between them based on context. This is not confusion, this is sophistication. They have built a civilization on embracing paradox. They are simultaneously their own worst enemy and their own best hope. They create problems and solutions with equal enthusiasm. They are capable of tremendous cruelty and tremendous kindness, often within the same individual. They are, in short, complicated. And that complication is not weakness. It is their greatest strength. Recommendation: Council should not fear humans. Council should be prepared to learn from them, because they have solved a problem we have been avoiding for millennia. How to be intelligent without being logical. How to be advanced without being rigid. How to embrace change without losing identity. They are messy and chaotic and absolutely impossible to predict, and that makes them more ready for galactic community than we are ready for them. Respectfully submitted, Investigator Quilnoth. The extraction ship arrived at midnight. Quilnoth stood on the roof of his apartment building waiting. The ship was invisible to human detection, a shimmer in the air that resolved into a doorway. Globnak stepped through, his eye stalks drooping with what might have been relief or exhaustion, or both. Investigator Quilnoth, your reports have caused quite the stir at the Council. I imagine they have. Half the Council wants to quarantine Earth immediately. The other half wants to fast-track them for contact. There's a betting pool on how long before they either destroy themselves or achieve faster-than-light travel, and your final report was forwarded to 17 different subcommittees who are currently arguing about its implications. Good. They should argue. Argument is how you reach truth. That's very human of you to say. Quilnoth nodded. Yes, it is. Are you ready to come home? Quilnoth looked back at the city spread out below him. Lights in windows. People living their messy, complicated, contradictory lives. Jessica was down there somewhere, probably asleep. His students were finishing their term papers. Samira would wonder tomorrow where he'd gone. Dr. Reeves would write it off as another weird professor disappearing in the night, because Portland was like that. What happens to Earth now? Quilnoth asked. The Council is voting tomorrow. Your report will be presented. Depending on the outcome, Earth will either remain under observation for another 1,000 cycles, or, Globnax hesitated. Or what? Or we open contact. Officially. Bring them into the galactic community, which, given what you've reported, could either be the best decision we've ever made, or absolutely catastrophic. My vote is for contact. You don't get a vote. You're just an investigator. Then what's the point of investigating if nobody listens to the results? Globnax's eye stalks twitched in what Quilnoth had learned to recognize as amusement. You sound like one of them now. Questioning authority, demanding logic from bureaucracy, getting emotionally invested in outcomes. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. They stood in silence for a moment, Two aliens on a roof above a sleeping city of humans who had no idea they were being discussed by a galactic government that would determine their future. "For what it's worth," Globnak said quietly, "I read your reports, all of them, not just the official summaries, the personal observations, the conflicted notes, the parts where you were clearly struggling with what you were seeing. And I think you might be right, about humans, about us. About all of it. Will it matter? Tomorrow we'll find out." Quilnoth took one last look at Portland, at Earth, at the species that had somehow gotten under his skin, despite him not technically having skin anymore. "Tell the Council something for me." "What?" "If they vote against contact, they're idiots. And if they vote for contact and then try to manage humans like they manage everyone else, they're even bigger idiots. Humans don't respond well to being managed. Trust me on this." I tried to lecture them about themselves and nearly triggered a student revolt. Globnax made a sound that might have been laughter. "I'll include that in my report. I'm sure it will go over well." They stepped through the shimmer, and Earth vanished behind them. The council chambers had never been so full, every seat occupied, every representative present. Even the members who usually called in remotely had actually shown up physically, which was either a sign of unprecedented interest or unprecedented concern. Possibly both. Quilnoth stood in the center of the chamber, back in his natural form, which felt both comfortable and strangely wrong after 6 months of being human-shaped. Globnax presented the reports, all of them, the initial observations, the weekly updates, the conflicted middle period, the final report that had sparked so much controversy. When he finished, Councillor Vrax spoke first. "Investigator Quilnoth, your reports are unusual. You were sent to observe objectively. Instead, you became subjectively invested. How can we trust your conclusions?" "With respect, Councillor, objective observation of humans is impossible. They respond differently when watched versus when integrated with. To truly understand them, I had to become one of them temporarily. My subjectivity is not a flaw, it is data." "You fell in love with one of them," Councillor Wisp of Morning accused, smelling of scandal and peppermint. "Yes, which taught me more about human bonding patterns than 1,000 surveillance recordings could have. You taught their young, you influenced their development, minimally, and they influenced mine far more significantly. That was the point, to see what happens when our species interact." Threnady's time-shifted voice cut through the debate. "We should have predicted this outcome, which we are currently debating, which we will continue to argue about until nothing gets decided." Vrax raised a massive appendage for silence. "The question before us is simple. Do we maintain observation protocols and wait another 1,000 cycles, or do we initiate contact now?" "They are not ready," shouted a councillor from the rigid sector. "They still fight among themselves. They have weapons that could destroy their planet. They argue about everything. And they will continue arguing about everything even if we wait 1,000,000 cycles," Quilnoth shot back. "Because that is who they are. You are waiting for them to become rational, logical, peaceful. They will never be those things, not fully, because they have chosen a different path than we did. They chose adaptability over stability, creativity over consistency. They are not broken versions of us. They are an alternative approach to intelligence." The chamber erupted in chaos, 17 different species arguing in 17 different languages, while the translation matrix tried desperately to keep up. Finally, Councillor Nementh spoke, his voice cutting through the noise. "I move that we put it to a vote. All in favor of maintaining current observation protocols?" Approximately half the chamber raised various appendages. "All in favor of initiating contact protocols?" The other half raised appendages. "And we have a tie. Perfect. This is exactly what I expected. The Council cannot make a decision about humans because humans have made US as contradictory as they are just by existing." He turned to Quilnoth. "You spent 6 months with them. If you had to make this decision yourself, what would you do?" Quilnoth didn't hesitate. I would ask them, I would land a ship, introduce myself, and let them decide if they are ready for contact, because that is what they would do if the situation were reversed. They would not wait to be judged ready by others. They would make themselves ready by attempting the impossible and learning from the failures. The silence that followed was absolute. "That," Wisp of Morning finally said, smelling of shock and bergamot, "is the most ridiculous proposal I have ever heard, and also possibly the only one that makes sense." Vrax's geological form shifted, causing minor tremors. "You are suggesting we violate every first contact protocol we have established over 17,000 years? That we just show up and ask?" "Yes." "That is insane." "It is very human, yes." Globnax's eye stalks performed a complicated dance that suggested his brain was trying to process something it had no framework for. But what if they refuse contact? What if they panic? What if they attack us? Then we will have learned something important about them, and they will have learned something important about us. Either way, we move forward with information instead of speculation. The debate raged for 3 hours. Quillnoth stood in the center answering questions, defending his position, occasionally wondering if he had actually gone insane from prolonged exposure to human logic. Finally, Vrax called for order. "We will put Investigator Quillnoth's proposal to a vote. All in favor of initiating direct contact with humanity, allowing them to determine their own readiness?" The vote was not unanimous, but it was enough. The proposal passed by exactly 3 votes. Councillor Plivitz, who had been silent throughout the entire debate, suddenly spoke up. "I would like to note for the record that I voted in favor. Please remember this when things inevitably go wrong." "Noted!" 17 councillors shouted simultaneously. Vrax turned to Quillnoth. "Congratulations, Investigator. You have just convinced the Galactic Council to do something completely unprecedented. I hope you are right about humans. Because if you are wrong, this will be remembered as the worst decision in Council history. And if I am right, then it will be remembered as the second worst decision, because even if it works out, the process was absolutely ridiculous." 3 weeks later, Quillnoth stood on a stage at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Beside him stood Globnax, Vrax, Councillor Wisp of Morning, and a carefully selected delegation of council members who had been chosen specifically to look non-threatening, which had resulted in a group that looked like a cosmic petting zoo. The General Assembly Hall was packed. Every nation had sent representatives. Media from every country crowded the observation areas. The Internet, that great human invention for spreading both information and misinformation with equal enthusiasm, was absolutely losing its mind. The Secretary-General, a human woman named Ambassador Okoye, who had the expression of someone whose day had gone in directions she absolutely had not anticipated, stood at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed delegates, members of the press, and everyone watching around the world." She paused, took a breath, and committed to the madness. "We are not alone in the universe, and our new friends would like to introduce themselves." Quillnoth stepped forward. He had chosen to appear in his human form for this, figuring it would be less jarring. He could reveal his true form later, after everyone had processed the initial shock. "Hello, Earth," he said, his voice broadcast to approximately 4 billion people simultaneously. "My name is Quillnoth. I'm an investigator for the Galactic Administrative Council, which is the bureaucratic governing body for approximately 247 different species across this region of space. For the last 6 months, I have been living among you in Portland, Oregon, pretending to be a visiting professor from a country called Latvaskia that does not actually exist. I apologize for the deception. It was necessary for accurate observation. Doyle, the silence in the General Assembly Hall was so complete you could have heard a molecule move. "I am here today because the Council has debated for weeks about whether your species is ready to join the galactic community. We have argued about your violence, your contradictions, your seemingly chaotic approach to existence, and we finally realized we were asking the wrong question. The question is not whether you are ready for us. The question is whether we are ready for you, and whether you want anything to do with us at all. He gestured to the delegation behind him. These are representatives from the Galactic Council. They have traveled here, violating approximately 17,000 years of established protocol, to ask you directly. Do you want contact? Do you want to know what is out there? Do you want to join a community of species that, frankly, could learn quite a lot from you? Because here is what I learned in 6 months of living as one of you. You are ready. You have always been ready. You are just different from us. And different is not inferior. Different is essential. Ambassador Okoye stepped forward. On behalf of the United Nations, I have approximately 17 million questions. I expected no less, Quillnoth replied. Humans are very good at questions. It is one of your most admirable traits. Starting with, what do you want from us? Nothing, actually. We are offering something. Membership in galactic civilization, access to technology, trade, cultural exchange, knowledge. The ability to travel beyond your solar system without using chemical rockets that are, frankly, adorable, but inefficient. And in exchange, your presence, your perspective, your completely unique approach to problem solving, your art, your music, your food. Oh, your food. We have 17 species that are probably going to start trade negotiations immediately just for access to your cuisine. A delegate from France stood up. Are you saying you want our cooking? Among other things, yes. You have combined flavors in ways that defy our understanding of chemistry. You have created taste experiences that should not be possible. You put sugar on meat, and somehow it works. A delegate from China raised her hand. Are there other humans out there, in space? No, you are unique. One planet, one species. That developed intelligence, technology, art, mathematics, philosophy, all on your own. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Most species need contact with others to push their development. You just did it, by yourselves, while arguing the entire time. Ambassador Okoye held up her hand. I think we need to slow down. This is a lot to process. You are saying that aliens exist, that there is a galactic government, that you have been living among us, and that you want to invite us to join. In summary, yes. And if we say no, then we leave. We close the file. We come back in another 1,000 years and ask again. Your choice, always your choice, that is the point. We are not here to invade or conquer or demand. We are here to ask. The delegates erupted into conversation, 17 different languages being spoken simultaneously, questions being shouted, accusations being made, conspiracy theories being formed in real time. Quillnoth waited patiently. This was very human. The chaos, the inability to agree, the simultaneous excitement and fear. Finally, after approximately 45 minutes of absolute pandemonium, Ambassador Okoye called for order. We will need time to discuss this, as a species, as nations, as individuals. This is not a decision one person can make. Of course, Quillnoth agreed. Take all the time you need. We will wait. How long are you willing to wait? As long as it takes. We have learned that rushing humans is counterproductive. Over the following weeks, Earth had what could only be described as a collective nervous breakdown, mixed with a birthday party, mixed with an existential crisis. The internet exploded. Everyone had opinions. Everyone. Scientists demanded immediate access to alien technology. Religious leaders debated theological implications. Politicians argued about who should represent Earth. Conspiracy theorists claimed they had known all along. Meme creators did what they did best and turned the entire situation into absurdist comedy gold. Quillnoth's personal favorite was a video that had gone viral, showing his old coffee shop encounters, edited together with dramatic music, and the caption, Alien attempts human interaction, fails spectacularly. Jessica called him. She'd seen the news. Everyone had seen the news. It was literally impossible not to see the news. So, she said, Latvaskia does not exist, no. I apologize for the deception. And you are actually an alien? Yes. Okay, I can work with this. There was a pause. Did you mean any of it? The dates, the conversations, or was it all just research? It was research that became real. I did not expect to care about you, about any of you, but I do very much. What do you even look like? Actually, would you like to see? They met in person, Quilnoth in his natural form. Jessica took one look at him. His non-Euclidean structure, his eye stalks, his partial existence in four-dimensional space, and said, Huh, you are really weird. I know. But you were already weird as a fake human, so this is at least consistent weird. Is this acceptable? Jessica thought about it for a moment. You know what? Sure. Why not? 2025 is already insane. Might as well date an alien. My therapist is going to have a field day with this. News outlets interviewed Quilnoth constantly. He answered every question with the patience of someone who had spent 6 months learning that humans needed to process things through talking about them extensively. Are there hostile aliens out there? One reporter asked. Define hostile. There are species we disagree with, species with different values. But invasion fleet coming to destroy you hostile? No, that is actually very rare. Most species are too busy arguing with their own governments to bother conquering others. Sound familiar? What is the most advanced technology you have? Faster than light travel? Consciousness transfer? Matter replication? Basically, everything your science fiction predicted, except none of it works the way your science fiction described. Your writers were very creative, but not particularly accurate. Will you share this technology? Eventually, but not all at once. Because we learned the hard way that giving species technology they have not culturally developed to handle causes problems. You need to be ready, not just technically, but socially. How long until we are ready? You are asking the wrong question. You are already ready for some things, not ready for others. It is not binary. It is spectrum. We will work with you to figure out what makes sense when. Dr. Reeves tracked him down at his hotel. She walked in, stared at him in his natural form and said, I knew there was something off about you. You did? Yes. Nobody talks about physics like that unless they know more than they are saying. I knew it. Are you angry? Are you kidding? I am thrilled. Do you have any idea how many physics problems you can help me solve? I have questions, so many questions. She pulled out a notebook that was apparently full of theoretical physics problems she wanted to discuss. Quilnoth spent the next 6 hours in what could only be described as the happiest conversation about quantum mechanics he had ever experienced. Trevor from his class sent him an email. Professor Q, I told everyone you were cool. Nobody believed me, but you are literally the coolest. Can I write my final paper about this? Will you still grade it even though you are an alien? The council watched all of this with what could only be described as fascinated horror. They are treating this like a festival, Globnax reported, his eye stalks twitching with confusion. There are alien-themed parties, memes, merchandise. Someone is selling T-shirts that say, I survived first contact and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. Are they panicking? Vrax asked. Some of them, yes, but most of them are just rolling with it. They have incorporated our existence into their worldview with the same enthusiasm. They incorporate everything else. It has been 3 weeks, and they are already making jokes about it. Councillor Wisp of Morning released a cloud that smelled like confusion mixed with grudging admiration. Quilnoth was right. They are not like other species. They do not need time to process. They process while doing. They accept and move forward simultaneously. 3 months after first contact, the United Nations held a vote. Every nation had been consulted. every population surveyed. Millions of discussions, debates, arguments, and occasional fistfights had occurred. The vote was not unanimous, but it did not need to be. Earth voted to accept membership in the Galactic Council. The celebration that followed was very human. There was music, dancing, food from every nation, speeches that went on too long. Fireworks, because humans could not have a major event without setting off explosives in the sky for aesthetic purposes. Quilnoth stood with Jessica, watching the celebrations in Times Square on a massive screen. "This is insane," Jessica said. "Yes, we are really doing this, joining space civilization?" "You are. What happens now?" "Now, you meet the galaxy, and the galaxy meets you. And everyone learns that the universe is much more interesting when you stop trying to make everything fit neat categories." "Are you staying?" "On Earth." Quilnoth had been thinking about this. "The Council has offered me permanent position as Earth liaison. Someone needs to help translate between your chaos and their bureaucracy. And I appear to be uniquely qualified, having experienced both. So that's a yes." "That is a yes." Jessica kissed him, which still felt strange but good given his current form, and said, "Good, because you owe me an explanation for about 17,000 things you said that made no sense, and I am keeping a list." 5 years later, Earth had its first faster-than-light capable ship. Humans crewed it, naturally, with a mixed delegation of Council observers, who were there mostly to make sure the humans did not accidentally blow something up. The ship was named Probability Drive, because the human physicist who designed the FTL system claimed she had done the math, and this will probably work. It worked. Humans began spreading through the galaxy with the same enthusiasm they spread through every other frontier they had encountered. They opened restaurants on council stations. They started trade companies. They created art that confused and delighted alien audiences. They asked questions. So many questions. They also inevitably caused problems. A human delegation attempted to explain democracy to a hive mind species that had literally no concept of individual disagreement. The hive mind spent 3 days processing the concept and then asked if humans were sure this was a good system because it seemed needlessly complicated and emotionally exhausting. The humans said yes, they were sure. It was terrible, but also the best option they had found so far. The hive mind found this answer both horrifying and somehow reassuring. A human chef caused an interstellar incident by introducing the concept of spicy food to a species whose pain receptors interpreted capsaicin as a religious experience. They now had a cult based around hot sauce. Human musicians discovered that their concept of rhythm was completely unique in the galaxy. Most species had music, but only humans had developed the specific combination of mathematical precision and emotional chaos that made for good dancing music. Human clubs became the hottest venues in council space, mostly because aliens could not believe that humans voluntarily subjected themselves to sound patterns that seemed designed to cause cardiac arrest. And through it all, Quilnoth served as liaison, translator, mediator, and occasional firefighter when human enthusiasm collided with alien protocol. He appeared before the Council regularly to explain various human behaviors that had caused confusion. "Why did a human delegation bring a dog to a diplomatic meeting?" Globnax asked, his eye stalks performing gymnastics of bewilderment. "Because the dog is an emotional support animal. Humans bond with other species and bring them along for psychological comfort. They domesticated another species for emotions. They domesticated several species for emotions. Dogs, cats, horses, ferrets, rabbits. They have been doing this for thousands of years. But why? Because it makes them happy, and happiness, they have determined, is worth the effort." The council sat in stunned silence. "That," Vrax finally rumbled, "is the most illogical and simultaneously perfect thing I have ever heard. 10 years after first contact, Earth hosted the first Galactic Council summit held on a human world. Representatives from 247 species descended on Geneva, Switzerland, where humans had prepared facilities that accommodated everyone from methane breathers to beings that existed partially out of phase with reality. The summit was chaos. Productive chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Species that had never agreed on anything found common ground by complaining about human coffee being too strong. Delegates that had been in political deadlock for centuries discovered they could bond over being confused by the same human behaviors. Ancient enemies sat next to each other and discussed the completely baffling human practice of stand-up comedy, which involved one human standing on a stage and deliberately making everyone uncomfortable for entertainment purposes. On the final day of the summit, Councillor Vrax requested a private meeting with Quillnoth. They stood in a garden that humans had created specifically for the summit, with plants from Earth carefully arranged alongside botanical samples from 17 different worlds. Quillnoth, Vrax began, his geological voice softer than usual. I wanted to thank you. For what? For being right about humans, about everything. We were so concerned with whether they fit our definitions that we never asked if our definitions were adequate. They forced us to expand our understanding of what intelligence can be. They are rather good at that, yes. The Council has voted. We are establishing the Quillnoth Protocol for future first contact situations, named after you. The principle is simple. When encountering new species, do not measure them against our standards. Ask them about theirs. Let them teach us how they think, rather than forcing them to think like us. Quillnoth felt something warm in his thorax region. Pride, probably, or indigestion. Sometimes it was hard to tell. That is, I am honored. You should be. It is the first time in Council history we have admitted that maybe, just maybe, we do not have all the answers, and we learned that from the species we thought was too chaotic to teach us anything. Vrax paused. How are you finding life as permanent Earth liaison? Exhausting, rewarding, confusing, perfect. Very human of you. Yes, it is. Quillnoth returned to his apartment in Portland that night. Jessica was already there, working on a design project on her laptop while eating Chinese takeout directly from the container because plates are for people who have their lives together. How was Geneva? She asked. Productive, chaotic. The Council has officially stopped trying to make sense of humanity and started trying to learn from humanity. About damn time. They also named a first contact protocol after me. Nice! Do you get a plaque? I do not know. Probably. The Council loves bureaucratic recognition. Jessica closed her laptop. You know what is weird? Many things. Please be specific. 5 years ago, I was just a graphic designer making logos and dating occasionally and wondering if my life was going anywhere. Now I'm dating an alien. Earth is part of a galactic government, and I just got a commission to design a logo for an interstellar shipping company. How is this my life? Humans are very good at adaptation. We kind of have to be. Reality keeps getting weirder. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, eating Chinese food that technically should not work as a flavor combination but absolutely did. Do you ever regret it? Jessica asked. Staying. You could have gone home, gone back to your normal life. This is my normal life now, and I prefer this version. The universe is more interesting when you allow yourself to be surprised by it. That is the most human thing you have ever said. Good. I have been practicing. 20 years after first contact, the Council archives were updated. The file on Earth, which had once been buried in subsection upon subsection of irrelevant classifications, was moved to a new category that the Council had created specifically for humanity. The classification read, Paradox Species, unable to be categorized by standard metrics, approach with curiosity rather than caution. Warning, prolonged exposure causes existential recalibration of observer. Recommend this as feature, not bug. Status, Active member. Threat level, beneficial chaos. Notes. They brought dogs to the council. We have collectively decided this is acceptable and possibly adorable. Further study ongoing. Expect continued unpredictability. Have accepted this as permanent condition. The file also included a footnote added by Glorbnax himself. If you are reading this because you are about to interact with humans for the first time, here is my advice. Give up on understanding them completely. Instead, enjoy the experience of being constantly surprised. They will frustrate you, confuse you, occasionally horrify you, and then they will do something so beautiful or clever or kind that you will forgive all of it. They are not a problem to be solved. They are a phenomenon to be appreciated. Also, try the pizza. Trust me on this. The council's silence had begun when Earth's file was opened. It ended when they finally learned to listen to what that file was actually telling them. That intelligence comes in forms they had never imagined, that chaos can be productive, that contradiction can be strength, and that sometimes the most important question is not, are they ready for us? But rather, are we brave enough to let them show us a different way? And somewhere in Portland, in an apartment with terrible furniture and a coffee table that served no purpose, an alien investigator and a human graphic designer argued about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, while in the background a television showed news of humanity's fifth faster-than-light colony ship launching toward a star system where nobody had ever heard of pizza, but